everybody. I'm Phil Fersht. I'm the CEO at HFS Research, and I'm joined with my esteemed colleague Saurabh Gupta, who's our President of Research and Advisory. We've just completed a really exhaustive study on automation services, and we thought we'd share a few snippets of this research with you today, because we see 2023 in particular as we called it the year of the autonomous enterprise. And a lot of this is because, big changes are often triggered rather than driven. And, we go back to 1995 and the advent of the internet. That really drove globalization. In 2008 was like the second big trigger, when the Great Recession really brought about a lot of low-cost offshoring of IT in particular. And then we see this new trigger happening around now, which is an economy that is complexified very much by inflation, by an energy crisis, by some recessionary activities. And we really think that as we move into next year, combined with a lot of the chaos driven by work from home and this return to work, automation is really becoming of age. And a lot of this is because I think if you're an operations leader today, you're expected to be able to run an automation initiative. You need to figure this out, or you're going to be cast aside. It's simple as that. You need to be on top of how to look at your operations, simplify them, figure out how your processes and workflows operate more effectively to get the data you need to be successful as you move forward. And so we really think that there's been a lot of development in technologies that enable automation. We started with RPA 10 years ago. We've seen a lot more development going on in document processing, in AI, in chatbots, which have become digital associates and even digital employees is what we're calling them a lot now. So we're seeing a lot of advancements in emerging tech. And I think next year we're going to see some layoffs, unfortunately. I think businesses are struggling in the current economic climate. And companies are going to be simplified, and they need to figure out how to automate fast to be more effective, to be more sustainable, and they need it to fill the void in a tough economy. So I'm going to hand it to Saurabh to talk a bit about what we learnt during our research. We covered all the major service providers of automation solutions to share a little bit about what we saw in the research and who did well, who did great, and what these horizons mean as we look at relationships between enterprises and service providers.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. So look, as Phil mentioned, we looked at 18 leading automation service providers, and the thing to note is all 18 are pretty strong service providers. What we were trying to do was to align them with the 3 horizons framework that we have for innovation, where Horizon 1 is really about driving functional transformation, through more driving better outcomes. These are typically around savings, cost efficiencies, productivities, etc. Horizon 2 then takes a more enterprise-wide view around automation, and not just drives your cost savings and productivity, but also drives significantly improved stakeholder experience, whether that's employee experience or customer experience or even partner experience. And then Horizon 3 is about driving completely new sources of value, right? Can the service provider partner with the enterprises to not just drive savings and productivity, but also drive growth, right? How is automation going to be leveraged as a strategic vehicle to drive completely new sources of value? So those were the 3 horizons that we looked at, these 18 service providers. And I think 5 really stood out, Phil, when we looked at these 18, and those were the sort of Horizon 3 service providers that we positioned. And let me just go through these 5, very quickly to say what stood out for us. And I'll go with these 5 alphabetically because all 5 are great. The first one is Accenture, right? I think what we liked about Accenture was their Accenture One philosophy and their organization structure around Accenture One, which completely aligns with the HFS One office. In fact, they've now built a one asset architecture across the entire length and breadth of Accenture, which has these repeatable IP solutions. And I feel, if you look at the service provider landscape, Accenture is one service provider which can drive strategy and execution at scale. There are companies that we evaluated who can drive really strong strategy. Bain, for example, is a part of our landscape, very strong on strategy. But what about execution, right? And I think Accenture is one which drives that strategy and execution at scale. I think the other provider that uh, impressed us really was Capgemini. And I think true to the HFS, one office and one ecosystem, they are starting to infuse automation into everything that Capgemini does, from business services to applications to even Capgemini engineering, Sogeti, Capgemini Invent, every business unit that Capgemini has, this automation practice sits at the center of this. And I think that approach will will drive what they are calling the frictionless enterprise, right? Because you can't look at automation as just restricted to business or IT or something else. It needs to drive across the end-to-end enterprise. The third Horizon 3 service provider was Cognizant, and they've recently launched this enterprise automation practice. And what we like about them is their industry orientation, right? They're focused on industry specific services for automation. Their Cognizant Neuro is also allowing for faster cloud adoption, which in this autonomous enterprise that Phil was talking about in 2023 will become very, very important. The fourth Horizon 3 provider was IBM. IBM calls it extreme automation, which we like not only as a term, but also because it starts to align business and IT together, right? And drives outcomes. And then the whole use of IBM Garage to drive co-creation and this coming together of IBM Consulting, which brings together automation with the rest of the emerging technologies, is a pretty strong value proposition. And last but not the least, in these Horizon 3 providers was Wipro, right? And I think what stood out for Wipro was their focus on change management. The zero touch change philosophy and methodology that they have, because if, as we've talked to many automation initiative enterprises running automation initiatives, it is not the technology that is the frustration. It is the aspects around culture and change management that drives the frustration with these initiatives. And Wipro's focus on change management should be, a lot of clients that we talked to gave kudos to that. And then, the whole aspect of Wipro where uh, almost 67 or 70% of their economic interests are devoted to philanthropy, sort of allows it to be a purpose-led organization when dealing with these initiatives. So I think it really drives that Horizon 3 purpose-led economy that we've been talking to. So that's a quick summary of the 5 Horizon 3 providers out of the 18. I would say the rest of them had very strong strengths, Phil. So this was a hard one for us to take out. I feel overall the services landscape has matured quite well, but still the focus needs to be on value creation, right? Not just going through the motions. I think enterprises are looking at cost reduction, efficiency, productivity as hygiene, right? If you're not delivering that through automation, then what's the point, right? I think these are some service providers who are doing more, and that's why we position them as Horizon 3.
Right. And, we've talked a lot about outcomes, and we've talked a lot about reconstructing commercial models, and particularly in the current labor environment. Do you think automation is going to have a major role to play in helping to change the whole way that these commercial structures are operating, or do you think it's still a fairly long way off?
Absolutely. I think, Phil, you and I have been talking about outcome-based pricing for donkey's years now, right? Maybe we met 20 years back, and even then we were talking about outcome-based pricing, and it's always been that question. But I think given where we are, from a macroeconomic perspective, where there's inflation, supply chain disruption, there's just so many macroeconomic, and then a recession, so many macroeconomic headwinds, combined with the fact that you need to grow, right? How do you do that, right? How do you triangulate those two? And I think you have to delink services revenue from effort to be able to do that, right? And I think automation can prove to be a great vehicle to drive that. In fact, when we looked at these 18 service providers, Phil, we are starting to see more and more pricing structures, especially around automation initiatives, to be more transaction driven. Automation as a service versus pure bums on seats kind of pricing, right? So there, I'm encouraged, at least from an automation perspective, how this will, uh, you know, uh, manifest from a broader services context. I'm still hopeful. I think in a way, sometimes recessions and tough economies push us into doing the right things that we should have done 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, well, I think to 2008 we did a lot of papering over the cracks and used easy options like offshore, where it was one-to-one labor displacement. But now it's the real painful stuff that's starting. And while it's going to be a complex year, I think it's going to be an amazing year for consultants and analysts and some service providers who pick the right clients. Yeah, it's a good time to observe the market. Maybe not a great time to be making painful changes, but here we are, right? So anyway, I hope you will enjoy the report. You go to hfsresearch.com, click on our Horizons page under research, and you'll see a copy of our automation services report. I think it's available for free for a little time. So get on there, read away, and send us any feedback. Thank you very much, Saurabh, and thank you for spending some time talking about this today.